Jesus comes after the Pharisees quite a bit, but Jesus never violates the holiness of God, ever. Jesus stays holy. Jesus was a friend of sinners, but Jesus never sinned with them. Jesus had dinner with tax collectors, but Jesus never cheated people out of money. Jesus had dinner with prostitutes, but never used one. He was able to thread this needle of love and acceptance and holiness, and he sort of paved a way for us that if we're willing, we could follow it. Yeah. Well, hello, everybody. We've kind of got a fun, different way of doing it. Welcome back, by the way, to Dr. Troy Jones.
2 weeks in a row.
It'll be, this is kind of a little bit different, but there's a reason why, and that's because some of you may or may not know, we produce these, at a sequence, and sometimes we're ahead, sometimes we're a little behind. But this past weekend at New Life, which is the church that produces and sponsors Theology Threads, New Life Church, nlchurch.com, that you preached just this incredible message on this idea of being a Pharisee and being a recovering Pharisee. And so I thought, man, let's get this in. Let's talk to people, because I think this is a big deal in the church today. I think this is something that we all sort of struggle with, whether we want to admit it or not. So I thought, man, let's kind of move some things around in the schedule. Let's pivot off of our plans and let's just capture the moment. So, Dr. Troy Jones, welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here and great conversation. It's interesting because we're in the John series, and all of a sudden you run into this story in John chapter 8 where the Pharisees bring this woman caught in adultery to Jesus.
Yeah. So that's sort of, let me just give context. That's what led us to this message. Is really just the pattern or the outline. We're committed to John for this year. And this is where we were at. No agenda, it's just where the passage landed.
Brian, absolutely no agenda. Let's walk through the text.
It was the next passage.
And here's the story.
Yeah.
And boy, it really resonated with the people. I think it because I acknowledged to the church that I'm a recovering Pharisee.
Right.
And I used that phrase.
Yeah.
I actually said, hello, my name is Troy Jones.
Yeah, so hold on. So everyone, all of our, whether you're in the car, you're listening, you're watching, Pastor Troy, my friend Troy Jones, Dr. Troy Jones, leader, innovator, architect, not arsonist, all these things.
Just keep on saying it.
Just keep going. Papa, which is the title you're most proud of. You have a confession for our Theo Threads audience, our Thread heads out there.
My confession says, hello, my name is Troy Jones, and I'm a recovering Pharisee.
And to say, we all say, hi, Troy. So welcome to Recovery Group.
And so, Brian, I said that on Sunday.
Yeah.
And it absolutely resonated in a way that took me by surprise.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're preaching, you go, God used that phrase, recovering Pharisee. And I realized in the middle of preaching, all Christians, maybe not all, but most Christians are recovering Pharisees.
Yeah.
At least that would be the goal, I guess. That would be the goal. And saying that really resonated. I got more responses, more texts, more emails from that one message, just saying thank you for being honest about the process of your own life, being a recovering Pharisee.
And why do you think the response has been what it is? What chord did you strike? What heart moment did you hit, do you think?
I've been reflecting on that.
Yeah.
Because why? Why are people
why
responding?
This versus the other 16 messages we preach in John?
I think there's a tension in our culture and a tension in every church. The difference between, we've talked about this before, between being legalistic and indifferent, right? There's a tension. Or some would even use the word tolerance over here. Where do we land on all this?
Yeah.
And I think that inside of people's heart, we're trying to figure out what holiness is really all about, what is happening in my own heart. And so I think the tension was illustrated when I was talking about my challenge with dancing when my daughter was 15 years old, and we found ourselves at a wedding, a reception, and everyone was dancing. All these church members were dancing.
So people of your church, you were pastoring, staff members, board members, elders, men and women that you've respected for generations.
We're dancing.
And they're dancing.
And here I am, I was 40 years old, and my daughter's 15, and I was against dancing.
Right.
And so, Brian, against dancing, and we'll have this in the show notes, actually reading the whole story.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll provide a link where you can actually watch Pastor Troy tell the whole story and then read actually a reflective
because
document.
It's a lengthy story.
That you wrote then.
I wrote then.
So this is 2006?
Yeah. Yeah, October 2006.
And it landed in you so much that you actually took time in your prayer journal to write.
I literally went home, Brian.
About a 10, 15-minute reflection.
Yeah, it's like a, and I had to shorten it for the reading they'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like a 15, 20-minute deep reflection. What's going on inside of me that my 15-year-old daughter wanted to dance with her daddy, and I couldn't get myself to do it. Yeah. I froze, Brian. I'm feeling the emotions even when I'm saying it. I'm at the dance floor, and I walk through it, they can see me read it. But all these emotions, like, is this wrong? Is this right?
Yeah.
I'm a pastor. What are people going to say?
Right.
I mean, it was emotional down to the point where I almost like had to have an altar call right there.
Yeah.
And so just to get myself to say yes to my daughter, to dance with her, and I'm going, what's going on in there? And what's going on is I was, in many ways, without knowing it, in all, when I say in good innocence, it wasn't evil, but I was basing my relationship with God a lot on just rules. Like, I don't smoke, I don't chew, I don't dance, I don't go with girls who do.
Right.
And so my behavior was somehow so anchored in things that when you take an honest look, you don't find in the Bible. There's nowhere in the Bible, matter of fact, that says don't dance. The Jewish custom would dance all the time, right?
Right, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. I remember when I was a kid, so you and I aren't that too far apart in age. When I was a kid, there was a Christian artist, and maybe we can link his Spotify onto this, named Leon Patillo. Do you remember Leon Patillo at all? Leon Patillo, he had been a piano player for Earth, Wind & Fire, the Commodores, one of those funk bands. And he got saved, got in ministry, all that. And he had a song called Dance, Children, Dance. And everyone lost their minds. Everyone lost their minds because you can't dance. You can't, dancing is something that it was just loaded. So I grew up very similar to you, although I grew up in church. You didn't, but you came into church, and I grew up in church, but in this idea called the holiness tradition, where there were marks of your holiness. And we were reminded that without holiness, no man shall see God. That Peter wrote to the people reading his letter, be holy as I am holy. And so this call for holiness, but what it turned into
was bunch of rules.
Here's what holiness looks like very specifically. Very specifically.
Yeah, and so, again, back to Sunday and then back to my 2006 story, it just stirred something deeply in the church. And for me, Brian, in 2006, I had to decide what kind of dad would I be at that moment, and what kind of image of God did I want to leave in my 15-year-old daughter's mind. It was emotional for me. Did I want Kaylee to think God is rules that don't make sense, that are not found in the Bible? Or did I want Kaylee to see God as a loving father? Because I don't want Kaylee to see God as a legalistic father, nor indifferent.
Right. As a father doesn't care and you can do whatever you want.
So it's not. So think about this tension. If you're there, this tension, I don't want to be indifferent. Everything goes. Let's just do it. Because that's not the Bible either. And yet, legalism, I don't smoke, I don't chew, I don't go with girls who do. And, Jana, my wife, comes from a bit of that too, where even when I took her to a skating rink the first time, I want to hold her hand. She thought it was wrong to go to the skating rink.
Yeah, let alone hold hands in public.
And so, Brian, for me, here's why this conversation is important, because, let me just get real, it's for my grandkids and for my daughters. I want them to serve Jesus. Right. And they're going to reject Christianity. I've said this before on this podcast. I want them to reject real Christianity.
Yeah.
I don't want them to reject, this is huge, my Christianity or what I make up. Hey, you don't dance, you don't do this, you don't do that. I want them, and I say this about anybody, reject real Christianity, not what we make up. And I think so many things, for those that are listening, watching, I think if you're honest, we have put rule upon rule upon rule upon Christianity. And so people that are outside of it are our kids. They go, what?
Yeah.
They're going, really? They're going, really? Christianity means you can't dance with your dad?
Yeah, so I think as a reflection on that, number one, if there are these things that you come to mind, maybe you were raised in church, you weren't, or you had an impression in church, share with us in the comments things that you thought were strange, that this seems to be a weird rule. Share that in the comments. And I do want to say this, if you have a friend, specifically maybe someone in your life who is unsure about faith or unsure about Christianity, number one, make sure you're subscribing and you do all the things we're supposed to do, but share this episode with them, because hopefully this will be a chance for them to, as we say, know what Christians really believe, which is the heart of the podcast, the heart of the show, and to really, hopefully, this could be a way of introducing them to a more, I don't want to say innocent, but for lack of a better term, just a pure, more innocent version of Christianity than perhaps one they experienced as a teenager or as a kid. So do that. Share with us in the comments,
And
but
Brian,
also
I think
share
that's
with a
important
friend.
because I think a lot of people are turned off to Christianity because of the rules that we have put on it.
Yeah, so we just did the episode. The previous episode is about why should I even bother going to church?
Yeah.
And now we're following it up with, especially if the church is full of a bunch of hate-filled hypocrites.
Self-righteous people.
Self-righteous
and again, by the
hypocrites.
way, I think legalistic Christianity is first, it's just not in the Bible. We're going to talk about. It's just not Bible. It's we'll talk about where the Pharisees come from in a minute. But indifference is not there either.
No.
So either one is not us showing the world who God is.
Right.
And so my phrase I use, so I'm a recovering Pharisee, and then another phrase is there's a Pharisee inside of all of us.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I really believe if you are a Christian, and I think this is true about Christians, it's true about churches holistically, and it's true about pastors and leaders. For the most part, I can't say all, because if you say all, then you're not correct. So I'm going to say the vast majority, if not all, Christians and churches, there's a Pharisee inside of you.
Yeah.
And that Pharisee may even look like indifference, which we could talk about maybe later.
Yeah, it's its own form.
Legalism, and I'm asking the church world to come back to Christianity, to recover from it. And not only for your own sake, so you have joy in Christ, so you can walk with the power of the gospel, so for your own sake, but for the sake of your kids, grandkids, for the sake of your neighbor, let's show them that Christians do not build their life on these rules, but we really build our life on the power of the gospel.
Yeah.
The fact that Jesus is Lord and God raised him from the dead.
Yeah.
That is Christianity.
What we really believe. So with that being said, well, in a second, we'll kind of get into kind of the nerdy stuff, which a lot of people on the show like, and they like some of the nerdy historical stuff. But very quickly, you have in your heart what is just a simple sort of a modern concept of defining a Pharisee.
Yeah.
Well, a modern Pharisee, it's kind of right there at the top of where we're looking at. But right there, before we go any farther, a modern Pharisee does what? How can I immediately know right now if I'm listening, wait, he may be talking about me. I definitely know he's talking about someone I know.
Yes.
Because we always know he's talking, but we're not asking about the someone you know. We're asking about you. What is that for you? How did you share it with us on Sunday?
Oversimplified is someone that puts rules over relationship.
Just that clear.
Rules over relationship. Another way to put that is my relationship with God is based upon rules and not true, authentic relationship with Him.
Right,
So it's rules over a relationship. And what we're going to do, I want to encourage the listeners and watchers to stay to the end of this, because you and I are going to have a little fun, because out of this came a book. I went home and started to type again.
Yeah.
And I got 12-step program for those that want to be a recovering Pharisee.
So we're going to actually be workshopping a 12-step program for recovering Pharisees.
In a few moments.
Right.
And
So make sure you watch all the way through to the end, because it'll be there.
I'm going to walk through the 12-step program. I'm going to ask you if you like it. Should I get rid of it?
Yeah.
I'm going to have you.
You're going to ask me to be legalistic
about my book.
This is going to be trade wreck. Okay.
So Brian, let's get a little bit. You use the word nerdy, geeky. Is that
nerdy, geeky? We're all good. Just keep going, man.
So where did Pharisees come from? So tell me, where did that Pharisees just come from?
So it's interesting. If you and I have a friend, for example, who gave his life to Christ earlier this year, and he's discovering the Bible. So if you're reading the Bible, and all of a sudden you start in the New Testament, now all of a sudden there's this group of people. They weren't there before. They're not in the Old Testament. You don't see anything about Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, Zealots. None of those people are in the Old Testament.
So where do they come from then?
So there's about 400 years between the last words of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament. And believe it or not, a lot of stuff went down in those 400 years. It wasn't like people are just sitting around, playing Smash Bros. And going to coffee shops. A lot went down, and there's a dynasty. There's a kingly family, the Hasmonean dynasty. They're also known as the Maccabees. And during that period, they write some stuff, and in one of those historical reference, they talk about a group of people called the Hasidim, or the pious ones. Okay, the pious ones are then broken up into these groups. One is called the Pharisees, another's called the Sadducees, and the Pharisees were this group of. They would be, believe it or not, they would actually be a little bit more of the. They were sort of lenient originally. They were saying, hey, we don't have the temple anymore. The temple's been destroyed. The temple that is being built, we're not big fans of it. How can it be right? It's not the way that God designed it. So what we need to do in order to stay pure before God is we have to get the rules right. So they became very fixated on preserving the highest goals of purity. It was all about, can we preserve our purity before God? So much that they really obsessed on food laws specifically, cleanliness laws.
Did they take these laws from the Old Testament?
Yeah, so they took the Old Testament laws, which, if you really pay attention, aren't comprehensive. They're somewhat vague. Sometimes they're bizarrely specific, like what do you do if you get mold in your roof? And then sometimes they're really vague. So what they said is we can't risk the vague. We can't risk the ambiguity. So we'll just start, well, if it meant this, surely it meant this. So for example, if God says rest on the Sabbath, well, we need to rest. Well, can I work on the Sabbath? Well, if your ox falls into the ditch, you're allowed to do this because that's sort of work, but it helps you. But if it doesn't fall into the ditch, to the point, one of the famous examples of Pharisaical interpretation is you can't spit if you have to spit on the Sabbath, which is a day you're not supposed to work, you have to spit on a rock because it'll just dry out. Because if you spit in the dirt, then you've made mud, and you're doing the same work that God did when he made man, because he made man out of the earth. Therefore, you're not resting on the Sabbath. So It got that precise. There are elaborate stories of how to wash a bowl properly so that you're unclean. You washed a bowl, and then your hands would drip the unclean water into, so you had to have all these bowls. So Jesus makes a various statement about, hey, you make sure the outside of the bowl is clean, but the inside of the bowl is rotten.
Wow.
And so there's all these little cues to that. But they really emerged as honestly, the People's Party. Because there's another group of leaders called the Sadducees, and they were really tied into sort of what we would call the ruling elite, the religious and political elite. And they really didn't care about the common man. They just wanted to make sure that whoever the oppressor of the day, at this point it's Greece and then it goes on to Rome, didn't give them any problems. And they were very much like the high priest and that kind of stuff. The Pharisees were kind of the People's Party. They were like, hey, there's a reason we're being judged. It's because we're not righteous. Let's get back to righteousness.
What's interesting is one cannot really appreciate the New Testament if you don't know about Pharisees. Because
Absolutely.
When you read the Bible, you need to see the drama or the tension behind the Bible, right?
Right.
And you really cannot appreciate the New Testament unless you know the group of Pharisees that came along and kept questioning Jesus. And even in Acts 15, it was the Pharisees that says, you must be circumcised in order to be saved.
Right.
It caused a whole drama. So it's like a movie. Like, I don't know if you ever tried to watch a movie, you didn't know the problem or the tension behind the movie.
Right, yeah.
It's dull.
Yeah, it's like when you watch a movie and they have if it's a historical movie, my wife and I tried to watch a historical movie just last night, and the title screen comes up. Where it says 18 whatever, and this happens and this happens. We actually have to pause it to make sure that we read all that
in order to understand.
It maybe has nothing to do with the plot, but there even clues. And understanding those 400 years before the New Testament starts is actually pretty massive.
Yeah.
It's really understanding the world in which Jesus inhabited.
Just as a Bible tip for people, this is why the Bible is not interesting to read for people. Because they don't understand the drama.
Yeah.
Even if you were not a Christian, you would appreciate Jesus coming in on the scene and going, hey, you hypocrites.
Yeah, like he's coming.
He's challenging 400 years of...
Yeah, and he's coming after all these people who are really, if you're just on the surface, you're saying, hey, we just want to get it right. And that's why we say here on the podcast so often, do the work. Just want to highlight something there.
Do the work. Yeah, it's just fascinating.
Because you do, yeah, for sure.
I just think it's huge in really understanding the Bible. And Brian, I think this is... one reason why I so like the Bible is I really like to know the drama behind it. And drama, is that the right word?
The tension, yeah. I think the setting, the context.
What's going on.
And I tell people this a lot of times when I teach about reading the Bible, is never forget, this stuff really happened.
Really happened.
These were real people with real issues and real problems, and it really happened. These were real guys.
These Pharisees really brought this woman caught in adultery to Jesus.
Yeah, so that's the story from John 8 that sort of sparked this whole thing. They really did that.
And they were trying... Well, they were trying to trick him there.
They were trying to trap Jesus.
Yeah, so they weren't in pure form there.
No. Because what happens is over the centuries, and this comes from the the Dictionary of Jesus and the Gospels, which is sort of an academic resource, but InterVarsity Press has this great series it's a dictionary series, and they're fantastic. Maybe much for your average person, but if you really want to know some deeper stuff, it's great. We'll put a link in there. But this idea that the Pharisees really saw themselves, and this is critical, they were the protectors of the piety of traditional Judaism as they saw it. So think about that words. They were the protectors. They were there to defend the purity of Israel, but as they saw it. Yeah. So it was their opinion about what would keep people pure, and they were radical defenders of it.
This is why becoming a recovering Pharisee is challenging, because at some level, nothing's wrong with being a protector.
No.
Nothing's wrong with being a guardian of truth or whatever it would be. And so it is really challenging. And I think this is why this 12-step program we're going to talk about in a moment is huge, because it's really why you're doing it. Like, why didn't I want to dance with my daughter?
Really, why?
Why?
So think about
was
Paul.
I trying to protect anything there?
Right. So Paul, Paul, as a political and academic category, was a Pharisee.
Yes.
He was a registered card-carrying Pharisee. He said, I'm a Pharisee of the Pharisees.
Yeah.
Right. I'm as in. And look where that level of holiness drove him. That idea that I have to piously protect the purity of traditional Judaism drove him to break up families, throw people in jail, and have people killed.
Wow. So in the most simple form, what do Pharisees believe? Give me like...
Yeah. So essentially, they believed that we have to preserve these physical goals. There's a great article I found online. We'll put a link to it. Jerry Bridges from Ligonier. And there's a couple of things. Number one, that God primarily is a demanding God. So number one, they believe that God demands things of us. Okay, so there's that. Rather than relational, God is no, here are the rules. Number two, this was a statement that I liked. God looked only at external compliance.
Wow.
So they were very focused on the getting the outside right. That's why Jesus calls them whitewashed tombs at one point. Yeah. So imagine going and painting over a tomb and saying, look how pretty it is. Yeah, but it's full of dead, decaying rottenness. Yeah. And that's why Jesus calls them
Again,
that.
I want to remind the readers, when you're reading the Bible and you see anytime the term Pharisees come up, think about what we're talking about.
Yeah, think about this.
These are what Jesus was coming into that
right.
situation, that tension, and trying to deal with.
So their big beef with Jesus, as my 16-year-old would say, what was their big beef with Jesus? Their big beef with Jesus was, number one, Jesus tended to ignore their extra rules. So this is critical. They had the Old Testament given to them. They felt like it was too vague, so they added rules over the years. Yeah. Okay, so this, for example, the spitting thing, right? Yeah. Jesus basically ignored all of those rules and said you really should only be paying attention to the stuff that was actually written down. Okay, Paul goes way more radical later, but let's just stick with Jesus right now.
He does go more radical.
Yeah, but Jesus basically says pay, and that drove them nuts. The other thing is that Jesus wasn't having their interpretation of how to deal with the Sabbath. So there's an article, Jerry Bridges, we'll link on this, that really breaks it down. Jesus wasn't having their obsession with the Sabbath. Jesus was saying, you guys have got the Sabbath wrong, you have all these petty little rules wrong, and so I know they're not right, so I don't have to obey them. No one does. And that created a lot of problem because they not only, in the best version of this, they're protecting the holiness of Judaism, okay? In the worst version, he's coming after their power and authority over the everyman, the everyday man. Your average Joe fisherman. Because most of the average people would have said, the Pharisees are our guys, the Sadducees are a bunch of elites, I'm with the Pharisees. And now Jesus is coming and he's subverting both the elitism of the Sadducees and the populist traditional legalism of the Pharisees as well. Wow. And he says neither is going to stand before God.
So why did Jesus rebuke them then? Why did Jesus... Maybe the answer is obvious, but say it out loud.
Yeah. So I think one of the best versions of this is in Mark. So Jesus has a mix-up with them in Mark chapter 7, and it's a pretty substantial one, and they get in their little fight, and they their little song and dance or whatever. But this is what he says. Mark chapter 7, verse 6. And he said to them, so they're going back and forth about okay, so the whole argument is over the fact that Jesus' disciples don't wash their hands properly. So that's the discussion. That's the meeting we're having.
That's the meeting, yes.
You've called a meeting. This could have been an email, right? Okay, but yeah. So you guys don't wash it. And he says this, and he said to them, Mark chapter 7, verse 6, well, did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites? Okay, whoa, okay, Jesus. It is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me.
Wow.
Why did Jesus rebuke them? Because they honor me with their lips. They honor God with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. And Jesus explicitly says, so why did Jesus rebuke them? Mark 7, verse 8, you leave the commandment of God and hold to the tradition of men. And what they've done is they've essentially said, our traditions are now on par and in some places more important than the explicit commandment of God.
What's fascinating to me, Brian, all this history is why I had a hard time dancing with my daughter that night.
Right.
Think about that.
Yeah.
All this history that I know not of, but had creep into my Christianity.
Right. Because you weren't raised with the same holiness baggage that I was.
No, I wasn't.
And yet we would have found ourselves in the same.
Yeah, I
So
wasn't.
this is interesting. I grew up in it. You inherited in it, but it still landed in the same place for both of us.
And I would say my guess would be it wasn't even as extreme of your upbringing.
Yeah.
I was.
To be fair, I got away with a lot.
Yeah.
I should probably say that.
No, so let me ask
North
you.
Pulaski High School, you remember me at some dances.
Brian, let me ask you, there's a Pharisee inside of all of us as a Christian. Agree, disagree? Talk to me about that.
I think there's a Pharisee inside of all of us, and I'll tell you why.
So you say all.
I would say all. You name a Christian, and I'm going to say even my sweet Mima probably had a little bit of Pharisee in her. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that right now. Even my mom, sweet Patsy Jean Jenkins, she's got a little bit of Pharisee in her. Like I do. I know I do. Yeah. Well, I'll just be honest.
Are you a recovering one?
I honestly don't know. After this Sunday, I don't know that I'm in a lot of recovery,
well, Brian,
actually.
Maybe I could take you through my 12-step program
I think I'm going to need it. Why? Because we have a bias to save ourselves. All humanity has a bias to save ourselves, and we're either going to do it, we talk about this on the show quite frequently, but we either going to do it through idealistic means, moralistic means, or through some kind of experience. We seek one of those things.
Wow.
I would be a Pharisee of ideas. By that I mean, if I know the right stuff, God will accept me. So I'm a Pharisee of ideas. I'm actually probably not a Pharisee of behavior, moralism, but I'm definitely a Pharisee of ideas.
Knowing Dr. Jenkins
as
your friend.
And I don't know that I'm recovering. I think I'm in the throes of it right now.
But
there's something inside of me that says if I just know and believe the right thing.
And yet you know that not to be true.
And I know that not to be true.
Yeah. It's because we both believe that it's faith in Christ alone.
Faith in Christ,
that is my salvation.
But I have but being wrong. Why would you want to be wrong?
Yeah.
Look where wrong can get you. And this, by the way, works out great in my marriage, I should say. My wife's a big fan of my obsession with being right.
Oh, I bet she is.
Oh, no, yeah.
No, Brian,
that was a joke. Do we need a joke
Brian,
alert, sarcasm banner?
We should start a club, Recovering Pharisee. We have T-shirts, Recovering
little
Pharisee.
T-shirts.
Because
you're
maybe
recovering
some
merch
Pharisee
for
on the
recovering.
basis of getting it right in terms of ideas.
Right.
And I would be based upon behavior.
Right.
Like you get it right there.
Because you're morally getting it right. I'm checking.
So
and then there's this whole other version of experienced Pharisees, which is I've heard from God. I worship loud. I feel the right things, right?
And you got different categories for Pharisees.
Oh, yeah, that's how much the ideas matter. I have to make sure I'm getting my Pharisaical sin right.
Well,
before I can be redeemed, it's a rat's nest. It's a rat's nest of steel wool up here.
So I like to call everyone that's listening, let's join the Recovering Pharisee group.
We're Pharisees Anonymous. Let's do it.
Here's why. We're trying to be passionate about Jesus.
We are.
We're trying to be like, he is the only way. Like, do I really believe, like in Acts 15, when they were going through that whole conversation, because the Pharisees were saying, you got to be circumcised in order to be saved.
And these are Pharisees who had converted to Christianity. These are not
So these are Pharisees who became Christians.
Yes, these are Christians who brought their Pharisaical worldview or lens or their Pharisaical hermeneutic, to use a big scholar word. They brought that into Christianity. And so Paul, who had that same training, was like, guys, This is so wrong.
And was it Peter or James? I think it was
It's James.
Well, Peter and James are both talking there.
Right, because they're sort of they're trying to figure it out.
Over circumcision. By the way, I want to know how they know people are not circumcised.
That's another
whole conversation.
There's creepiness on all levels because they're bringing this woman who's caught in the act of adultery. So those dudes are creepy.
That's true.
So
what did he say? No, we believe that by grace we are saved as they are.
As they are.
Yeah, as they are. So they're saved by grace. We're saved by grace. It's not saved by my ideas or saved by my behavior.
Right. And by the way, circumcision was an actual explicit law.
Very, very much so.
Yeah, I mean, it was
6,000.
6,000 years.
Abraham.
Right, we're going back to Abraham for circumcision.
And they're going, no, we believe is by faith in the Lord Jesus Christ we are saved. Period.
And what do they say? We should not what? We should not make it difficult
for the Gentiles who are turning to God.
Yeah.
So when it comes to all these things that we tend to bet, no dancing, we can go through the list over and over.
And you and I even have things, as we've discovered in the last couple of days processing it, that we're not even on the same page on whether or not we should allow it. We won't need to get into that.
Well, we could.
Put in the comments and guess. That'll be more fun.
Yeah, Brian and I disagree on that.
Yeah. And I think I shock you how legalistic I am sometimes.
I do. Do I ever shock you how legalistic I am?
No, because you're older than me. So.
Oh, good. Well, in the story, the older ones left first.
Oh, that's fair, because they were the ones who get it. It's a great story, by the way. I wish we could work through the story. Yeah, you got to read John 8.
You need to listen to the whole message.
Yeah, listen to the message. We'll link the message, but
because it's what's causing this.
Yeah, but it's a great story. Jesus writes in the sand. The old guys are like, "Oh, you got us. We got to go. I got a thing." All these guys are around trying to accuse this poor woman who is in what state? And it's interesting. You pointed this out in your message. I love that you pointed this out. They stood her.
Yeah.
So she is just the shame.
Yeah, they stood her in front of the group.
Stand up.
Oh,
yeah. And they're just ready to pounce. And you can imagine. And what does Jesus do? She stands. Jesus kneels. Wow. Jesus kneels before her.
Wow.
They make her stand before Jesus.
Not point that out
and
Sunday.
Jesus kneels before her.
Powerful.
And he kneels before all of them. He writes in the ground.
and he writes all their sin.
We don't know what he writes.
Well, I think he did.
Okay. Now you're being legalistic. Right. But then I love it. He says, and they began to leave one at a time, the older ones first. Because I just see all the old guys going, he got us.
No, the old guys are out.
He got us. Nailed it. We're out.
So in this
and
case,
all the young guys who are just, no, we can still stay. And the old guys are like, I don't have time for this. I got to eat. Yeah. The buffet starts at 4:30.
Again, I want to tell people, you don't read the Bible, you should. I mean, honestly.
It's crazy. It's nuts, the stuff that goes on in that book.
That's why I love preaching it, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Even if someone doesn't totally disagree with the text, you just got to sit there and go, wow.
Right. And these are not the stories that you make up.
No, these are
they make people look horrible. So, and what does he say? He says, and again, there's all sorts of historical context about they weren't actually even quoting the law of Deuteronomy correctly. They were actually breaking the law by doing some of the things. And I think they were trying to kind of hope that Jesus would break the law with them so that they could denounce him. And Jesus just threads that needle perfectly so that when everyone else is gone, by rabbinical law, none of the witnesses are there, so he cannot condemn her.
Yeah.
He can't. Rabbinically.
Wow.
And here's the amazing thing about Jesus. Jesus comes after the Pharisees quite a bit, but Jesus never violates the holiness of God, ever. Jesus stays holy. Jesus was a friend of sinners, but Jesus never sinned with them. Jesus had dinner with tax collectors, but Jesus never cheated people out of money. Jesus had dinner with prostitutes, but never used one. He was able to thread this needle of love and acceptance and holiness, and he sort of paved a way for us that if we're willing, we can follow it.
Powerful. Yeah. Maybe this is for you, helping you in your recovery process.
Here we go. All right.
First of all, we talked about some modern signs of Pharisees. So let me just.
Yeah. So here we are today. Let me ask you this. So here I am. You're like, oh, that's great. That's Bible times. I really don't care about the bowl that I use. I don't spit on the ground. How could I be a Pharisee? It's the 21st century. It's King County, wherever you're watching in the world. I'm enlightened. I'm an engineer. I'm an educator. I have an English degree. I have an art history degree along with everyone else. How would I know now that I'm a Pharisee?
Yeah. So let me just give you some signs that I've observed in my life and I've observed in church people that have this little seed of the Pharisee side of them. Here they are. I always have to be right.
Okay, check.
Yeah, if you always have to be right, first of all, you're going to have
I'm sorry, I feel like you're talking to me right now.
I know, I am.
Okay, all right. So Troy, how do I know? I'll ask, let's reframe this. What should I be looking for in my life?
Yeah.
If I have a worry, and I'm starting to, that I may not even be a recovering Pharisee. I think I'm just a straight up.
You still need to start with step one, admit that you are.
Right. Well, we'll get to that in a second.
Okay, good.
But how are the signs that I'm a Pharisee? Brian Jenkins is a Pharisee.
You always have to be right.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and that's just a sign. I think we need to be healthy about that. And that, I think, is just functional to relationships. Yeah. Boy, if you're married out there or want to be married one day, you're not going to have a happy marriage if you always want to be right. Yeah. With your kids. There's just so much there. Mm-hmm. So there's one side. Here's another one. See, I'm quick to judge, especially outward stuff.
Yeah. Is that I'm quick to have an opinion? Yeah. That's judging. Okay, that's fair. All right. So always have to be right, quick to judge.
By the way, this is me. This is I've recovered over. I apologize to people that heard me preach in my 20s. Mm-hmm. Because this is signs of that God's had to work out of my own heart.
Yeah.
I told you so, meaning when people fall, make mistakes, I told you, it's kind of an attitude. I told you.
Even if I don't say it to their face, my heart is saying it.
You know, most people won't say it to their face.
Yeah, no, they don't have the guts.
So I told you, thinking somehow my sin is not as bad as their sin.
Right. Yeah, I see that a lot. Not in me, but I do see that a lot by the fact of saying your sin is completely unreasonable. Yeah. It's awful and unholy and wretched. My sin, you don't understand. It's because, and then my sin always has a reason. Yeah. My sin has a context.
Another one I need to add to this is like when you think about your sin, you give yourself grace.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But when you think of other people's sin, it's judgment.
Yeah.
There's no, and we just tend to be judgmental to other people's grace. But
my sin is justified. Your sin is horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. It just is a sign.
Yeah.
And for those that are processing with this, I mean, this is a moment for you to be honest. Again, I think there's a Pharisee inside of all of us as Christians. And these, as you walk through this, it's obvious to me. And the last one right here is you hold your opinions as facts.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't know the difference between what's the dogma. We talked about this, what the dogma of Scripture is versus what's doctrine or what's opinion.
Yeah.
You hold everything as dogma.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Everything is right, wrong.
Right, and everything has the same level of intensity and outrage, and everything has the same level, like you said, of judgment. And
everything.
So here we are. These guys are having the same, the Mark 7 example. They're having the same level of outrage over how the disciples washed their hands.
Think about that, Brian. It's
just for a second. Or the fact that when they were walking on a Sabbath, they happened to pluck one little grain of wheat off of a wheat thing. And they're having the same as though they had been, like Antiochus Epiphanes, who sacrificed a pig on the altar of God. Like in their minds, you're doing the same thing. It's the same level of blasphemy and outrage.
It's just a sign.
Yeah.
It's a symptom that Pharisee's inside of you.
Yeah.
And we all have it. We all have it. For the ones that are fighting me right now, we don't have it. You're probably you may be the worst.
Yeah. Yeah. And to get to where, let's. We'll build into this. So what do I do?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, my name is Brian, and I'm not even going to say recovering. My name is Brian, and I'm a Pharisee. So what do I do?
Okay.
What do I do, Troy? How do I get out of this?
So we're having kind of a brainstorming and a serious conversation.
Yeah.
But I wrote down these 12 steps, and they're still in the making. So I would love to hear the input, honestly, from the audience.
Yeah.
Like in the comments, let me know which ones you go, oh man, keep that.
Yeah.
Rethink that. Get rid of that.
Yeah, and we'll share them, and we'll
let me just give them to you real quickly. I'd like to hear your gut reaction.
Okay.
So, 12-step program. Here we are. Number 1, admit your self-righteousness and judgmental spirit. Say it out loud.
Yeah. Yeah, I am. Wow, I'm having a moment here. I think I can't even say it directly. I'm going to have to force myself to say it directly. I am self-righteous and judgmental.
Yeah. That's hard to say.
It's very hard to say.
I am self-righteous.
As a Christian, to say that that's still in me. Because the whole point is that Jesus is the one. I can't be self-righteous.
Wow.
And I think of, so one of my favorite parables is Luke 18. It's the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. And because it makes me laugh. I think it's a silly story. But you have the Pharisee who stands in the front. He says, I thank God that I'm not like other men. And, and he gets it all right. And then he says, or even literally talking about the tax collector says, or this guy. He looks back and the tax collector says, just says, God have mercy on me, a sinner. And Jesus just asked, now which one of those left that synagogue justified? Mm. I have to constantly come, don't I?
Yeah.
Say, God, have mercy on me, a sinner.
Yeah, always.
Yeah. So that's step one.
So number two, step two, and I don't even know how to say this strong enough, so I'm going to use my language out here, is focus on Jesus. It's just get consumed with him again.
Yeah.
That he is truly the only reason we have salvation.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, that reminds me of Paul in Corinthians, right? I'm not going to preach to you anything but Christ crucified.
What do you say? But Christ.
Just Christ. Just you got to get Jesus right.
Do you believe Christ is enough?
But even then, listen to how I said it. You got to get Jesus right. The concept of Jesus, the idea of Jesus.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this recovering Pharisee, I mean, honestly, Brian, it's deep inside of us.
Yeah.
It's deeper inside of me. But I just want I want to say this again. For the sake of my my marriage, my girls, my grandkids, my neighbor, and in my case, my church, I got to get this right. I got to at least deal with it. Yeah. I think people can accept that I'm a recovering Pharisee, that I'm dealing with it.
Right.
Yeah, I told my girls the other day after this, because it's been emotional. One reason I was able to recover is because my girls, they helped me. Mm-hmm. They just helped me. When I look in their eyes, I want them to love Jesus, not my rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
So focus on Jesus. Number three, stop being a clanging cymbal.
Yeah, so that's a reference to 1 Corinthians 13.
That says, if you don't love...
Yeah, you're like someone taking a mallet to a trash can lid. Well, the clanging cymbal was a worship instrument. We don't use it anymore, but it's this loud, annoying... And he said that you're as shallow and as thin as empty as that.
So what he's saying there is, if you're really not compelled by love, so I always want to be right, literally compelled by the love of Christ.
Yeah.
If not, you're just a bunch of noise.
Just noise. Wow. Yeah.
I got to put a book together here.
I think you are.
Yeah. I mean, can we take this podcast and let it just write it for me?
Yeah, I think there would probably some AI thing that'll figure it out. So,
this number four, step four, is humble yourself. You know, Brian, I like to do a study. I think how many times the sin of pride is mentioned in the Bible.
Oh, so when we talk about, so we have an episode on pride and humility, and I think it's the one. It's the one. I think it's the most destructive thing. Doesn't it say in Proverbs God hates? He said, yeah. So the thing about pride is pride is one of the only sins that I could find in the Bible where God actively works against it.
Yeah.
That if you choose pride, you have actually set yourself in total opposition to what God is doing. It's the sin of Satan in a lot of ways. In the pride episode, we talk about the theological ramifications of how pride was involved in the devil's, just the formation of the concept of the devil and the reality of the devil. And throughout it's there. It's in James. It's in 1 Peter.
I mean, it's everywhere. And the word does say, James, humble yourself before the Lord, and He will lift you up. Right. I want to say, I don't think
says God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble.
There's so much there. You got to humble yourself, but I don't think other people can humble you. I think, or they humiliate you, right?
Right. Yeah.
There's a whole thinking there that if someone tries to, I need to humble that person. No, you tend to humiliate them at that moment. Yeah. There's a difference there.
Yeah.
I think humility has to be a choice on our part to say, God, develop that, because all of a sudden, and when we're talking about one of the recovering processes, developing new rules, new guardrails.
Yeah.
I think we need those, but they're developed with humility now.
Right.
And I can have a rule for my life that I just have for me, but it's done with humility. I don't have to put on the rest of the world.
Right. Yeah, because it's now a guardrail that says, I need this because I'm a sinner, not because I'm not doing this because I'm better than you.
Yeah, big difference. So humble yourself. Number 5, get over your church hurt.
Yeah.
I know that's an interesting one, and probably could say it. Maybe you like how I'm wording it?
Well, I think what's interesting about the church hurt is it's its own. It began very radically and quickly become its own form of legalism.
Yeah. And so if you're building your life on hurt, though,
right,
because someone else did it this way or not did it this way, you're not going to build a healthy life.
No, because you're always everything comes from a hurt place.
Yeah, a reaction.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this, even people that maybe swing to the side of indifference, to use that language there, or swing to the side of freedom, they're doing it because they're hurt. So like me dancing or not dancing, I'm not doing it because I'm hurt by the church or not hurt. I have to do it. I have to go down to the right core reason.
I think I see that a lot in deconstruction conversations.
Yes,
it's very rarely about the actual truth of Jesus or the gospel. It's about an experience of someone else, a person. And so now they're either legitimately or just sort of, whatever, using that as a premise by which to take down all the other things and to say, hey, this happened to me. More often than not, it comes down to this happened to me.
Yeah.
Why do you believe this? Because this happened to me.
And you got to get beyond that and bring forgiveness to that hurt.
Right.
We'll put these in the show notes, and honestly, I'd love input from the audience on any of these. But they're all powerful. Even reading them, I didn't realize how powerful they are. This next one is get close to the pain. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that, like the woman caught in adultery, those Pharisees didn't care about her name.
No. Her name's not even in the Bible.
Yeah, they didn't care about her story. Matter of fact, Brian, they used her pain. They leveraged her pain for their little tricks.
Yeah, it's pretty monstrous actually when you get to the heart of it.
So I talk about I think the problem with the American church is that we like to give opinions from a distance. Mm-hmm. And so I use this metaphor. It's like if I'm driving down, I don't like driving and I don't like 405, but when there's an accident in front of me 2 miles, when I'm 2 miles from the accident, I have all types of opinions. Mm-hmm. What's wrong with these people? Why am I sitting back here? They must have been texting. But Brian, when I drive by the accident and I see the dead body and I get close to the pain, I still may think that they should have been texting. Mm-hmm. But here's the deal. When you get close to the pain, everything changes.
Right. And if you have an opinion about how anyone is behaving, acting, thinking, believing, there's a context to everyone. There's a story to everyone, and there's a reality for everyone.
So that's why I think so many people are Pharisaical, because I'm just away from the pain. So I could judge you. I could judge, in this case, the woman caught in adultery. Yes, it's sin. Jesus declares it's sin. But when you're close to the pain, your heart humbles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it absolutely does.
And if it doesn't, if you're listening to me and it doesn't,
Yeah, you're in a tougher spot.
You gotta go back to number one. Admit that you're self-righteous.
If you're so jaded and calloused because of your own self-righteousness that you can't look at someone who's hurting and hurt with them, regardless of the concept of the hurt, that's a searing of your soul. That's a dangerous and horrible place to be.
Yeah.
Jesus wept with those who weep.
So get close. I would say to someone trying to recover from a recovering Pharisee, just get close to the pain. Go meet someone that is real.
Yeah.
It doesn't change that we have theological perspective of biblical truth, but get close to the pain. So number 7, rejoice with the younger brother. I love
referencing the prodigal son in the story there. Yeah. Luke 15.
And by the way, the father cared about the younger brother and the older brother, which was a Pharisee, by the way. Mm-hmm. That whole story was told to the Pharisees in Luke 15.
Right.
But force even if you have to make it, or make yourself rejoice with somebody that gets saved, a younger brother that comes home, rejoice with that.
Right. And if you don't know anyone, and if you don't have people in your life, you're not a part of a church, or you just don't have a lot of people coming to Jesus around you, that's a good sign that things are starting to dry up, by the way, also.
It is.
Yeah, because Pharisees love other Pharisees. That's who Pharisees hang out with.
Wow.
Pharisees didn't hang out with tax collectors.
We need to get some real broken people around us.
Yeah. You're like, I don't know anyone. I always think I don't know anyone who's far from God. Well, then you're not on mission. You're just surrounded by Pharisees.
And then when our hearts get,
And then we're shocked when we say Jesus was a friend of sinners. So,
So number 8, reconcile with people.
Yeah.
Matthew 5, he says, if you find yourself praying, but remember someone has against you, go fix it.
Yeah.
So I would say, it's kind of like AA. They talk about make
amends.
Make amends.
Making amends.
It's my wording for making amends.
Yeah. So like when you preach this message, you started by apologizing to everyone who was in your youth ministry, essentially in your 20s.
And I've had a few of them come and talk to me too.
Yeah, because they remembered some of those messages. Yeah.
And so you may need to reconcile, real reconciliation with people that you've hurt in your rightness.
Yeah.
People, maybe it's your children, your spouse, your neighbor. Maybe you were so right, but you hurt them.
Yeah, it came at the expense of their...
Yeah.
That's good.
Go apologize.
Yeah.
Jesus actually says, stop praying and apologize.
Yeah, it's more important that you stop praying and go apologize.
Isn't it interesting? He says,
than continue with this act of devotion and worship.
So these are the steps. I mean, they're you can see why most of to recover. It's
Yeah.
Let me just give you a few more. Wash someone's feet. I think I like that. Jesus washed the disciples' feet.
Literally?
Probably not literally.
Okay, good.
Let me be fair.
Yeah, let's be metaphorical.
That'd be weird.
But it means serve someone.
It means serve someone, yeah.
Go out and
like,
serve someone. Honor someone and serve someone.
Someone that's, that I'd say that has different beliefs than you or has different...
That's of a different status than you, or that in your legalism and in your Pharisaicalism you would see as lower.
Yeah.
Go and serve them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But don't tell them that you think they're lower and you're there to serve them. That would
not be the point.
Yeah, that would not be cool at all. So
celebrate differences. I was thinking about we got to learn how to really celebrate. 1 Corinthians 12 that says there's an eye, there's a hand, every parts of the body of Christ. We got to celebrate people's differences in all levels.
Yeah. I think we're really bad at that now in the church.
Yeah.
I really do. I saw that, I knew it was coming up, and I just thought, man, we're really bad at that. Like saying, oh, this church does it this way. Well, why would, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And what are they doing? And and we get all for harump. And it's like, no, they're not doing anything wrong. They're just doing something different. Yeah. And why do I care? Number one, I don't go to that church. Why do I care? Number two, they worship different, but they're not worshiping me. They're worshiping God.
But we don't celebrate that.
We don't. We're really bad at that.
What's interesting to me on that, Brian, is that people say, why are churches different? Well, you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So you have 4 gospels that tell the story of Jesus differently. Mm-hmm. All 4 tell the story different. Of course, churches are going to be different.
Yeah.
Again, that's just a sign that you're a Pharisee. That has to be what I prefer.
Right. It has to be my moral or pious standard, and I'm going to protect it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, then know the difference, and this is probably another whole podcast between personal conscience and Bible standards.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and we do not have the time to go into that.
No,
but
that's
man,
huge.
That's huge. Because of the importance of personal conscience.
Personal conscience is huge. But it doesn't have to be...
but it's not a universal biblical standard, and that has to be okay.
It has to be beyond okay.
Yeah.
So I have some personal things that are not necessarily for the whole world.
Right.
And I'd share them with you if you want to hear, but I'm not going to make them the Bible standard for you.
Right. It's a little bit of the James. To him who knows what to do and does not do it, to him that is sin. So that it's not relativism, but is this sense of there are these universal standards, but there are some things that, in fact, aren't right for you. But you need to know what the boundaries are there.
We almost need another whole podcast called Recovering.
That's a whole other thing.
And then develop guardrails for yourself. Let me just say this. A guardrail keeps you out of danger. That's what a guardrail is.
Yeah.
When you drive your car, there's a guardrail that won't let your car go like across the lane or over a cliff, right? Mm-hmm. I'm big into guardrails. So you have to to recover Pharisee, you have to get beyond the rules, and then you have to rebuild some what I call guardrails, are personal conscience issues in your life to keep everything on track and to keep your heart right with God. But you're doing it for a different reason.
Yeah, it can be, and Paul seems to argue for that even in Corinthians and in Galatians about using your freedom as a license for sin. That's not. You can find freedom from legalism, but that's not an excuse to go and do whatever you want.
This is not about using your freedom to do whatever you want. Yeah. Your freedom is we could talk about that. Yeah, we could talk about it forever, but thanks for making this pivot, if you will.
I'm glad we did it, and we probably will talk about this again, so make sure that you that you subscribe to the channel so you can find all of this stuff as we get into it. Make sure you let us know if you have any reflections. If you didn't like what we'd say it, but be nice, because I am still very sensitive.
Don't be legalistic.
Don't be legalistic about it, and I'm very sensitive about how wrong people are about what they think about what I say. But that was a joke.
Yes, I got it.
Sarcasm alert. But let us know how you enjoyed the show and let us know what you thought of it. Leave the 5-star review. Follow us on social media. But thank you,
absolutely,
Troy, for hanging out. My name is Brian, and I'm a Pharisee. So there we go. I said it. All right. Thank you. Have a great end.